Chapter 5. My knightly craft is winged in white, a dragon of night-dark sea. Swift-born, dream-bound, and rudderless, her captain and crew are me. I sail 100 sleeping tides where no seaman's ever been, and only my white-winged craft and I know the marvels we have seen. The next day did not start propitiously for Manoli. Her sleep was broken by shrieks, Dunca's, the girls, and the fire lizards. Dazed, Manoli at first tried to calm the fire lizard swooping about the room, but Dunca, standing in the doorway, would not be quiet, and her terror, whether assumed or real, only stimulated the fire lizards into such aerial acrobatics that Manoli ordered them all out the window. This only changed the tone of Dunca's screams, because the woman was now pointing at Manoli's nudity until she could snatch up the discarded shirt and cover herself. "And where were you all night?" Dunca demanded in a sobbingly angry voice. "How did you get in? When did you get in?" "I was here all night. I got in by the front door. You weren't in the cottage." Then, seeing the look of complete disbelief on Dunca's plump face, Manoli added, "I came here directly after supper. Pemer helped me across the court." "He was at rehearsal, which was just after supper," said one of the girls crowding in the door. "Yes, but he got there out of breath," Godiva said, frowning. "I remember Brudigan rounding him on it." "You must always inform me when you come in," said Dunca, by no means pacified. Manoli hesitated and then nodded her head in acquiescence. It was useless to argue with someone like Dunca, who had obviously made up her mind not to like Manoli and to pick every fault possible. "When you are washed and decently attired," said, and the tone of Dunca's voice suggested that she doubted Manoli was capable of either, "you will join us. Come, girls. There's no reason for you to delay your own meal." As the girls filed obediently past the open doorway, most of the faces reflected Dunca's disapproval, except Godiva, who winked solemnly and then grinned before she schooled her features into a blank expression. By the time Manoli had attended to her feet, had a quick wash, dressed, and found the small room where the other girls were eating, they were almost finished. As one, they stared critically at her before Dunca brusquely motioned her to take the empty seat. And as one, they all watched her, so that she felt doubly awkward about the simple acts of chewing and swallowing. The food tasted dry and the claw was cold. She managed to finish what had been set before her and mumbled thanks. She sat there, looking down at her place, only then noticing the fruit stains on her tunic. So they had reason to stare. And she had nothing to change into while this top was washed, except her old things from her cave days. Though she had eaten, she was still conscious of hunger pangs. The fire lizards were waiting to be fed. She doubted that Dunca would supply her need, but her responsibility to her friends gave her the courage to ask. "May I be excused, please? The fire lizards must be fed. I have to go to Sylvina." "Why would you bother Sylvina with such a detail?" demanded Dunca, her eyes popping slightly with indignation. "Don't you realize that she is the head woman of the entire Harpercraft Hall? The demands on her time are enormous, and if you don't keep those creatures of yours under proper control—" "You startled them this morning." "I'm not having that sort of carrying on every morning, frightening my girls with them flying at such dangerous speeds." Manoli refrained from pointing out that it had been Dunca's screaming that had alarmed the fire lizards. "If you can't control them, where are they now?" She looked wildly about her, her eyes bulging with alarm. "Waiting to be fed." "Don't get pert with me, girl. You may be the daughter of a sea holder, but while you're in the Harpercraft Hall and in my charge, you are to behave yourself. We'll have no ranking here." Half torn between laughter and disgust, Manoli rose. "If I may go, please, before the fire lizards come in search of me." That sufficed. Dunca couldn't get her out of the cot fast enough. Someone sniggered, but when Manoli glanced up, she wasn't sure if it had been Godiva or not. It was small encouragement that someone had recognized Dunca's hypocrisy. As she stepped out into the crisp morning air, Manoli realized how stuffy the cot had been and glanced over her shoulder.
"Stop putting your foot on me."
"Elliot, get your foot off of Charlotte." Sure enough, all the shutters except her own were closed tight. As she crossed the wide court, she received morning grins and greetings from the farmholders making their way to the fields, from apprentices dashing to their masters. She looked about her for her fire lizards and saw one wheeling down behind the outer wing of the craft hall. As she walked under the arch, she saw the others clinging to the kitchen and dining hall ledges. Camo was in the doorway, a great bowl in the crook of his left arm, a hunk of something dangling from his right hand as he tried to entice the fire lizards to him. She was halfway across the courtyard before she realized that it was much easier to walk on her feet today. However, that was one of the few good things that happened. Cama was chastised by Abuna for trying to coax the fire lizards to eat when he should have been delivering the cereal to the dining hall, for fire lizards would not eat from his hands until Manoli arrived. Then the fire lizards were frightened away when the apprentices and journeymen came tearing out of the dining hall, filling the courtyard with yells and shrieks and wild antics as they made their way to their morning classes. Manoli looked vainly for Pemer, and then, as abruptly, the courtyard was clear, except for some older journeymen. One of them paused by her, officiously demanding to know why she was hanging about the yard. When she said that she hadn't been told where to go, he had informed her that she obviously should be with the other girls and to get herself there immediately. As he gestured in the general direction of the arch room, Manoli assumed that was where the girls met. She reached the archway room to find the girls already practicing scales on their guitars with a journeyman, who told her she was late, to get her instrument and see if she could catch up with the others. She mumbled an apology, found her precious guitar, and took a stool near the others. But the chords were basic, and even with her injured hand, she had no trouble with the drill. Not so the others. Pona seemed unable to bridge strings with forefinger. The joint kept snapping up, and although the journeyman, Talmor, patiently showed her an alternative chording, she couldn't get to it fast enough to keep the rhythm of the exercise. Talmor had great patience, Manoli thought, and idly ran silent fingers down the neck of her guitar, doing his alternative placement. Yes, it was a bit awkward if you were after speed, but not as impossible as Pona was making it out to be. Since you're so good at it, Manoli, suppose you demonstrate the exercise, in the time. And Talmor directed the beat. She caught it with her eyes, keeping her head still, for Batirin had abhorred a musician who had to use unnecessary body motions to keep a rhythm going. She went through the chords on the scale as directed, and then saw Adiva regarding her with fierce intent. Pona and the others glowered. Now use the regular fingering, Talmor said, coming over to stand by Manoli, his eyes intent on her hands. She executed the run. He gave a sharp nod of his head, eyed her inscrutably, and then returned to Pona, asking her to try it again, though he outlined a slower time. Pona mastered the run the third time, smiling with relief at her success. Talmor gave them another set of scales and then brought out a large copy of a piece of occasional music. Manoli was delighted because the score was completely new to her. Batirian had been, as he phrased it, a teaching harper, not an entertainer, and though she had learned the one or two occasional pieces of music he had in his possession, he had never acquired more. The sea-holder, Manoli knew, had preferred to sing, not listen, and most occasional music was instrumental. In the bigger holds, Batirian had told her, the lord-holders liked music during the dinner hour and at night when they entertained guests in conversation rather than song. This was not a difficult piece, Manoli realized, scanning it and silently fingering the one or two transitional chords that might be troublesome. "All right, Adiva, let's see what you can make of it today," Talmor said, smiling at the girl with encouragement. Adiva gulped, exhibiting a nervousness that puzzled Manoli.
Wait, I have a question.
Why do we have hot sauce on the table?
I will answer you later.
Okay.
Adiva gulped, exhibiting a nervousness that puzzled Manoli. As Adiva began to pick out the chords, nodding her head and tapping one foot at a much slower rhythm than the musical notation required, Manoli's perplexity grew. Well, she thought charitably, maybe Adiva was a new student. If she was far more competent than Briala, who apparently had trouble just reading the music. Talmor dismissed Briala to the table to copy the score for later practice. Pona was no improvement on the other two. The sly-faced, fair-haired girl played with great banging against the guitar belly, at time, but with many inaccuracies. When it was finally her own turn, Manoli's stomach was roiled by frustrated listening. "Manoli," said Talmor, at the end of a sigh that expressed his own frustration and boredom. It was such a relief to play the music as it should be that Manoli found herself increasing the time and emphasizing the chords with a variation of her own in the strum. Talmor just looked at her. Then he blinked and exhaled heavily, pursing his lips together. "Well, yes. You've seen it before?" "Oh, no. We had very little occasional music in Half Circle. This is lovely." "You played that cold?" Only then did Manoli realize what she'd done. made the other girls look inadequate. She was aware of their cold, chill silence, their hostile stares, but not to play one's best seemed a dishonesty that she had never practiced and could not. Belatedly, she recognized that she could have hedged. With her scarred hand, she could have faltered, missed some of the chordings. Yet it had been such a relief, after their limping renditions, to play the music as it was meant to be played. I was the last to go, she said, in a lame effort to retrieve matters. I'd more time to study it and see... She'd started to say see where they went wrong. Yes, well, so you did, Talmor said, so hastily that Manoli wondered if he'd also realized what a break she'd made. Then he added in a rush of irritation and impatience, "Who told you to join this class? I'd rather thought..." A snigger interrupted his query, and he turned to glare at the girls. "Well?" he asked Manoli. "A journeyman." "Who?" "I don't know. I was in the courtyard, and he asked me why I wasn't in class. Then he told me to come here." Talmor rubbed the side of his jaw. "Too late now, I suppose, but I'll inquire." He turned to the other girls. "Let's play it in..." The girls were staring pointedly at the doorway, and he looked about. "Yes, Sibel?" Manoli turned, too, to see the man to whom the other coveted fire lizard egg had gone. Sibel was a slender man, a hand or so taller than herself. A brown man, tan skin, light brown hair and eyes, dressed in brown with a faded Harper apprentice badge half hidden in the shoulder fold of his tunic. "I've been looking for Manoli," he said, gazing steadily at her. "I thought someone ought to be. She was misdirected here." Talmor sounded irritated, and he gestured sharply for Manoli to go to Sibel. Manoli slipped from the stool, but she was uncertain what to do about the guitar and glanced questioningly at Sibel. "You won't need it now," he said, so she quickly put it away on the shelf. She felt the girl staring at her, knew that Talmor was watching and would not continue the lesson until she had gone, so it was with intense relief that she heard the door close behind her and the quiet brown man. "Where was I supposed to be?" she asked, but he motioned her down the steps. "You got no message." His eyes searched her face carefully, although his expression gave no hint of his thoughts. "No. You did breakfast at Dunca's." "Yes." Manoli couldn't suppress her distaste for that painful meal. Then she caught her breath and stared at Sibel, comprehension awakening. Oh, she wouldn't have. Sibel was nodding, his brown eyes registering an understanding of the matter. "And you wouldn't have known yet to come to me for instructions." "You hadn't..." Peemer said something about Sibel walking the tables to become a journeyman. "Sir?" she added. A slow smile spread across the man's round face. "I suppose I do rate a sir from a mere apprentice, but the Harper is not as strict about such observances as other matters. The tradition here is that the oldest journeyman under the same master is responsible for the newest apprentice. So you are my responsibility. At least while I'm in the hall and I'm enjoying a respite from my journeyings. I didn't have the chance to meet you yesterday, and this morning you didn't arrive as planned at Master Domic's." "Oh, no." Manoli swallowed the hard knot of dismay. "Not Master Domic." Even Peemer was careful not to annoy him. "Was Master Domic very... upset?" "In a manner of speaking, yes. But don't worry, Manoli. I shall use the incident to your advantage. It doesn't do to antagonize Domic unnecessarily." "Not when he doesn't like me anyhow." Manoli closed her eyes against a vision of Master Domic's cynical face contorted with anger. "How do you construe that?" Manoli shrugged. "I had to play for him yesterday. I know he doesn't like me." "Master Domic doesn't like anyone," replied Sibel with a wry laugh, "including himself. So you're no exception. But as far as studying with him is concerned..." "I'm to study with him?" "Don't panic. As a teacher, he's top rank." "I know. In some ways, I think Master Domic is superior, instrumentally, to the Harper. He doesn't have Master Robinton's flair and vitality, nor his keen perception in matters outside the craft." Although Sibel was speaking in his customary impersonal way, Manoli sensed his complete loyalty and devotion to the Master Harper. "You," and there was a slight emphasis on the pronoun, "will learn a great deal from Domic. Just don't let his manner fuss you. He's agreed to teach you, and that's quite a concession." "But I didn't come this morning." The magnitude of that truancy appalled Manoli. Sibel gave her a quick, reassuring grin. "I said that I can turn that to your advantage. Domic doesn't like people to ignore his instructions. It is not your worry. Now, come on. Enough of the morning has been lost." He had directed her up the steps into the hall, and to her surprise, opened the door into the great hall. It was twice the size of the dining hall, 3 times the size of the great hall at half circle. Across the far end was fitted a raised and curtained platform that jutted into the floor space. Tables and benches were piled haphazardly against the inner walls and under windows. Immediately to her right were a collection of more comfortable chairs arranged in an informal grouping about a small round table. To this area Sibel motioned her and seated himself opposite her. "I've some questions to put to you, and I can't explain why I need to have this information. It is Harper business, and if you're told that, you'll be wise to ask no further. I need your help." "My help?" "Strange as that might seem, yes." And his brown eyes laughed at her. "I need to know how to sail a boat, how to gut a fish, how to act like a seaman." He was ticking off the points on his fingers, and she stared at his hands. "With those, no one would ever believe you had sailed." He examined his hands impersonally. "Why?" "Seamen's hands get gnarled quickly from popping the joints, rough from salt water and fish oil, much browner than yours from weathering." "Would anyone but a seaman know that?" "Well, I know it." "Fair enough. Can you teach me to act, from a distance," and his grin teased her, "like a seaman? Is it hard to learn to sail a boat, or bait a hook, or gut a fish?" Her left palm itched, and so did her curiosity. Harper business? Why would a journeyman Harper need to know such things? Sailing, baiting, gutting, those are a question of practicing. Could you teach me? With a boat and a place to sail, yes. With hook and bait and a few fish. Then she laughed. "What's funny? Just that I thought when I came here that I'd never need to gut a fish again." Sibel regarded her sardonically for a long moment, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yes, I can appreciate that, Manoli. I was lamb-bred and thought I'd done with walking about. Just don't be surprised at anything you're asked to do here. The Harper requires us to play many tunes for our craft, not always on guitar or pipe. Now," and he went on more briskly, "I'll arrange for the boat, the water, and the fish. But when?" At this requisite, he whistled softly through the slight gap between his 2 front teeth. "Time will be the problem, for you have lessons, and there are the 2 eggs." He looked her squarely in the eye then and grinned. "Speaking of which, have you any idea what color mine might be?" She smiled back. "I don't think you can really be as sure with fire lizard eggs as you can with dragons, but I kept the 2 largest ones for Master Robinson. One ought to be a queen, and the other should turn out to be a bronze at least." The rapt expression on Sibel's face alarmed. "A bronze fire lizard?" The rapt expression on Sibel's face alarmed her. What if both eggs produced browns or greens? As if he sensed her apprehension, Sibel smiled. "I don't really care so long as I have one. The Harper says they can be trained to carry messages and sing." He was a great teaser, the Sibel thought Manoli, for all his quiet manner and solemn expressions, but she felt completely at ease with him. "The Harper says they can get as attached to their friends as dragons do to their riders." She nodded. "Would you like to meet mine?" "I would, but not now," he replied, shaking his head ruefully. "I must pick your brains about the seaman's craft. So, tell me, how goes a day at a sea-hold?" Amused to find herself explaining such things in the Harper Hall, Manoli gave the brown journeyman a dryly factual account of the routine that was all she'd known for so many turns. He was an attentive listener, occasionally repeating cogent points, or asking her to elaborate others. She was giving him a list of the various types of fish that inhabited the oceans of Pern, when the tocsin rang again, and her explanation was drowned by shouts as apprentices erupted into the courtyard on their way to the dining hall. "We'll wait until the stampede has settled, Manoli," Sibel said, raising his voice above the commotion outside. "Just give me that rundown on deep-water fishes again." When Sibel escorted her to her place, the girls treated her with a stony silence, emphasized by pursed lips, averted eyes, and then sniggers to each other. Buoyed by Sibel's reassurances, Manoli ignored them. She concentrated on eating the roast wary and the crusty brown tubers, bigger than she'd ever seen, and so fluffy inside their crust that she ate more of them than bread. Since the girls were so pointedly snubbing her, Manoli looked about the room. She couldn't spot Peemer, and she wanted him to come help her feed the fire lizards in the evening. She'd better strengthen what friendship she could within the Harper Hall. The gong again called their attention to announcements, and to her surprise, Manoli heard her own name called to report to Master Oldive. Immediately the girls fell to whispering among themselves, as if such a summons was untoward, though she couldn't imagine why, unless they were doing it to frighten her. She continued to ignore them, and then the gong released the diners. The girls remained where they were, pointedly not looking in her direction, and she was forced to struggle from the bench. "And where in the name of the first shell were you this morning?" asked Master Domic, his face set with anger, his eyes slitted, his voice low but projected so that the girls all cowered away from him. "I was told to go to—" "So Talmor informed me," and he brushed aside her explanation, "but I had left word with Dunca for you to report to me." "Dunca told me nothing, Master Domic." Manoli flicked a glance beyond him to the girls and saw in their smug expression the knowledge that they, too, had known there'd been a message for her, which Dunca had deliberately neglected to pass on. "She said she did," said Master Domic. Manoli stared back at him, bereft of any response and heartily wishing for Sibel to produce his assistance. "I realize," Domic went on sarcastically, "that you've been living homeless and without authority for some time, but while you are an apprentice here, you will obey the masters." In the face of his wrath, Manoli bowed her head. The next moment, Beauty came diving into the room with 2 bronze and 2 brown shapes right behind her. "Beauty! Rocky Diver, stop it!" Manoli jumped in front of Domic, arms outstretched, protecting him from the onslaught of winged retaliation. "What do you mean, disobeying me? Attacking Master Domic! He's a harper! Behave yourselves!" Manoli had to shout because the girls, seeing the fire lizard swooping down, screamed and tried variously to get under the table or off the benches, overturning them anywhere away from the fire lizards. Domic had sense enough to stand still, incredulous as he was at the attack. Despite the girls' shrieks, Manoli had the lungs to be heard when she wished to. Twittering, Beauty circled once and then came to Manoli's shoulder, glaring balefully at Domic from behind her mistress. The others lined up on the mantel, wings still spread, hissing, their jeweled eyes whirling, looking ready and quite willing to pounce again. As Manoli stroked Beauty to calmness, she struggled with an apology to Domic. "Back to work, you! The rest of you along to your sections," Domic said, raising his own voice to energize the stragglers in the dining hall who had observed the strange attack, and the boys who were clearing the tables. "I forgot about your loyal defenders," he told Manoli in a tight but controlled voice. "Master Domic, will you ever forgive—" "Master Domic," said another voice near the floor, and a diva crawled from under the table. Domic extended a hand to help the girl to her feet. She glanced toward the entrance, then gave Manoli a brief nod. "Master Domic, Dunca told Manoli nothing about your message, but we all knew about it. Fair's fair." With one more glance at Manoli, she hurried across the dining hall to catch up with the other girls in the courtyard. "How did you contrive to alienate Dunca?" asked Domic, his expression sullen but less fierce. Manoli gulped and glanced at the fire lizards. "Oh, them? Yes, I can quite see her point." There was no flexibility in Master Domic's attitude. "They do not, however, intimidate me." "Master Domic, that's enough, girl. Since you haven't the native intelligence to be tactful, I shall have to—" "Master Domic!" Sibel came hurrying up. I know! And the master cut off the journeyman's explanation. "You do seem to acquire some champions at any rate. Let's hope the end result is worth the effort. I shall see you tomorrow morning, promptly after breakfast, in my study, which is on the 2nd level to the right, 4th door on the outside. You will take your pipes this afternoon to Master Durant for the first hour. I'm told you made the pipes yourself in that cave of yours? Good. Then the 2nd hour you're to see Master Schoeniger. Now get yourself off to Master Oldive. His office is at the top of the steps on the inside, to your right. No, Sibel, you do not need to hover about her so protectingly. I'm not so lost to common sense as to punish her for being the victim of envy." He gestured imperatively at the journeyman to accompany him, and they strode out of the hall. Sibel gave her a quick nod and followed. Psst! Attracted by the sound, Manoli looked down and saw Peemer crouched under the table.
Peemer.
"Is it safe to come out?" "Aren't you supposed to be in a chore section?" "Yeah, but never mind. I've got a few seconds leeway. Hey, those fribbles have it in for you, don't they? Or maybe Dunca made them not tell you? How much did you overhear?" "All of it." Peemer grinned, getting to his feet. "I don't miss much around here." "Peemer!" "Manoli, can I help you feed the fire lizards tonight?" he asked, eyeing Beauty warily. "I was going to ask you." "Great!" He beamed with pleasure. "And don't worry about them," he added, jerking his head toward the door, meaning the girls. You're much nicer than them. You just want to make friends with my fire lizards. Too right. His grin was impudence itself.
The couch smells like...
But Manoli felt that he'd have been her friend without Beauty and the others. Gotta scamper, or I'll be put on. See ya. Okay, that's where we're stopping for the night.
The couch smells like